This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, it's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. Dusty Rhodes versus Kevin Sullivan was one of wrestling's most violent feuds ever. However, it was more than just that, as it pushed the envelope in wrestling, both with its brutality and the storyline embracing occult themes. Indeed, some observers have seen elements of the 80s cultural phenomenon known as the Satanic Panic in the Rhodes vs. Sullivan program. Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments presents The Fiend in Florida, Kevin Sullivan vs. Dusty Rhodes, Part 1. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Kevin Sullivan vs. Dusty Rhodes had something for everyone, and the feud personified just how epic a wrestling war could be. This storyline was about far more than just Sullivan and Rhodes battle with each other. Sullivan would amass a group known as his Army of Darkness, while the American Dream relied on a collection of his friends known as the Family. These two sides would clash in singles bouts and tag team tussles. Fans unfamiliar with the Florida territory era of the early 80s might be shocked by what they saw as the heels committed the wrestling version of crimes against humanity to the area's babyfaces. The misinformed who think hardcore wrestling started in the 1990s might be shocked to see how violent these in-ring clashes could get. Sullivan and his crew committing crimes and misdemeanors in their effort to rid the world of Dusty Rhodes and his friends. The violence was brutal, and at times horrifying, exactly the desired result to bring fans back to the local arenas to see Dusty and his allies collect payback from Sullivan and his crew of creeps. However, as Dusty himself would write, Sullivan was like a cinematic supervillain who surrounded himself with various flunkies. No matter how many of Sullivan's sinister servants he defeated, the Prince of Darkness himself always seemed to slip away. Or, in the rare cases where Rhodes seemed to defeat Sullivan, his tricky tormentor would strike back with an even more malicious scheme, doubling down on his villainy. The fact that Championship Wrestling from Florida was able to continue this storyline so long is a testament to the imagination of the territory's bookers as well as the talent of everyone involved. Rhodes vs. Sullivan raged in Championship Wrestling from Florida, an NWA territory owned and operated by wrestler-turned-promoter Eddie Graham, aka Eddie Gossett. Gossett began wrestling in 1948, eventually finding success as blonde heel Eddie Graham. He teamed up with his storyline brother Jerry Graham, aka Jerry Matthews, forming the superstar tag team the Golden Grahams. By the 1960s, Eddie was working as a babyface in Championship Wrestling from Florida. Graham became business partners with the promotion's owner, Clarence Luttrell, learning how to book matches while he continued wrestling. By the early 1970s, Graham purchased the remaining ownership of the territory, proving himself to be an outstanding promoter. According to wrestling historian Tim Hornbaker, Graham, the promoter, was as creative as they came. Feuds were stylishly molded, and quality angles and gimmicks were used that solidified Florida as a place of wrestling excellence. Even before taking over Tampa, Graham sat on the NWA Council. In the 1970s, he was a regular on the board of directors and had the confidence of Sam Muchnick that he too looked out for the entire organization and not just for the interest of his own promotion. Graham's Florida territory was a popular attraction for wrestlers, not only for NWA members, but for the WWF. Graham and WWF promoter Vince McMahon Sr. were close friends and shared talent, leading to several dream matches, including NWA World Champion Harley Race battling then WWF Champion Superstar Billy Graham. Many talented wrestlers worked in Florida, but none as successful as Dusty Rhodes, aka Virgil Runnels. Rhodes was known for his unforgettable promos, and whether you called them jive talking or a projection of blue-eyed soul, there was nothing like them. Initially working as a heel, Rhodes proved so popular with the fans that Graham turned him babyface. Rhodes' popularity wasn't contained to Florida, as he became a star attraction who worked in several other territories, including a run in the WWF where he feuded with superstar Billy Graham. Dusty lived up to his nickname, the American Dream, working hard and playing hard as he sought wrestling's ultimate prize, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. He eventually captured it from Harley Race in 1979, holding the belt for just 5 days. However, now that he'd proved he could win, he was determined to show his fans he could do so again. Rhodes faced many obstacles as he sought to regain the world title. As one of wrestling's top babyfaces, he was a target of heels looking to make a name for themselves, and occasionally the target of babyfaces who had grown jealous of Dusty's success and the fans' adulation for him. By 1982, Dusty had faced some of wrestling's biggest villains, but a new menace was waiting for him, a wrestler who had once competed on the side of the Angels, but whose reputation was now being questioned by two men who had once called him friend. Kevin Sullivan began working in the early 1970s, including a run in championship wrestling from Florida, where he teamed with Mike Graham, promoter Eddie Graham's son, forming a fast friendship and capturing the Florida Tag Team Championship. Sullivan worked around the country during the 1970s, including several years in the WWF. Although Sullivan was only billed as 5'9", his ring skills and mastery of ring psychology kept him out of the preliminary ranks. Despite a lengthy career as a babyface, Sullivan turned heel in 1980 during a title match against fellow babyface Steve Keirn, defeating Keirn for the NWA National Television Championship in Georgia Championship Wrestling. Sullivan utilized underhanded tactics, becoming a heel. Sullivan's sin would come back to haunt him nearly 2 years later. Kevin Sullivan returned to Championship Wrestling from Florida in 1982, but there was a cloud hanging over the supposed babyface's head, his past perfidy against Steve Keirn. Although Keirn had left the Florida area to compete in the Memphis area, he made sure everyone in Florida knew about Sullivan's past. Local star Barry Windham, the son of wrestler Blackjack Mulligan, warned fans not to trust Sullivan, who had changed his ways from a babyface. Adding to the intrigue, Steve Keirn sent a video to Florida. Keirn told interviewer Lance Russell that Sullivan wasn't the same man he'd been, and that everyone, particularly Keirn's friend Mike Graham in Florida, needed to know this. CWF announcer Gordon Sully asked Sullivan to respond to the accusations. If anyone thought Sullivan would get mad, they were mistaken. The stocky wrestler praised Steve Keirn for his honesty and called him a true friend. Sullivan admitted it's tough to have friends in wrestling, as everyone has the same goal, to make it to the top. He noted that it was admirable that Steve was looking out for his friends Mike Graham and others in Florida. Sullivan calmly replied, saying that unfortunately he was going through a rough patch when he last saw Keirn, and he had mistreated him. Sullivan apologized and said he hoped to one day make it up to him. In fact, he said he was sure if he had a moment to spend with Keirn that it could make things right. As for Barry Windham, Sullivan said Barry might not want to be his friend anymore, but he was still going to be Barry's friend. Sullivan continued the love fest, remarking how tight he was with Mike Graham, and that he hoped to prove himself. Gordon Sully seemed relieved by Sullivan's explanation, as did a young Terry Allen, who would later go on to success as Magnum TA for his resemblance to Tom Selleck's popular 1980s TV detective, Magnum P.I. Terry thanked Sullivan for helping him with nutrition and workouts. Sullivan thanked Allen for his comments and assured him everything was going to be okay. Gordon Sully told the fans this relieved his mind and that there was nothing to worry about. Nothing could be further from the truth. On October 6, 1982, Florida fans tuned in to see what they expected to be a scientific match between babyfaces Barry Windham and Kevin Sullivan over the vacant Florida Heavyweight Championship. Although Sullivan had a cloud hanging over him upon his return to the Sunshine State, he seemed to be a bona fide babyface, teaming with the promotion's various heroes to take on its assorted villains. Windham and Sullivan had fought their way to the final, and now a new champion would be crowned. The title match was held during a TV taping at the Sportatorium in Tampa, Florida. The match was anyone's for the taking, as both men seemed evenly matched. Although Windham was taller than Sullivan, Kevin had more experience and didn't lack in the strength department thanks to his heavyweight training. There were several near falls, and it was beginning to look as if the match might go the distance. That is, until disaster struck. Sullivan was bouncing off the ropes when Windham attempted to leapfrog him. However, Sullivan inadvertently headbutted Windham in the midsection. With Windham dropping like the proverbial sack of potatoes, the referee checked on Barry to see if he could continue, while Sullivan stood in the neutral corner. The announcers praised Sullivan's sportsmanship. This was all the more impressive, as a prestigious title was on the line. Then Sullivan shocked the wrestling world as he delivered a brutal kick to Windham's head, covering him for an easy 1-2-3. Sullivan was now the new NWA Florida Heavyweight Champion, but at what cost? Sullivan's actions astonished everyone present, including announcer Gordon Sully and wrestler Mike Graham, who was seated next to Sully. When Graham protested Sullivan's actions, Sullivan hemmed and hawed, initially saying he shouldn't have done it. Graham grew angrier, with Sullivan finally hearing enough and blasting Graham with his newly won championship belt. Gordon Sully tried to get answers from Sullivan, but but the newly crowned champion hightailed it out of the studio as Mike Graham recovered and lunged at Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan's heel turn had begun, but no one could have imagined the dark turn it would eventually take, with Sullivan gaining national fame as one of the hottest as well as unsettling wrestling storylines. Soon, Sullivan would cross paths with Dusty Rhodes, igniting one of wrestling's wildest wars. Did you get to see Kevin Sullivan versus Dusty Rhodes in Florida? Share your thoughts in the comment section and let us know if there are any videos you'd like wrestling's greatest moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, and spread the good news about wrestling's greatest moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.